In 1933, a mother in rural Oklahoma fed her husband and 4 children for an entire week on nothing but cornmeal, lard, and a handful of dried beans she found at the bottom of a sack she had already used twice. Nobody went hungry, nobody complained. And when her youngest son grew up and became a banker, he said the most sophisticated financial mind he ever encountered in his entire life sat at that kitchen table in a farmhouse with no running water. What she knew could have filled a textbook. Instead, it just kept her family alive. Hi, my name is Lester, and this is Forgotten Wealth Tricks, the channel where we dig up the financial knowledge your grandparents used every single day and modern life buried under a pile of credit card offers and subscription services. Number 25. Cooking with bone broth, pot liquor, and drippings. Nothing entered a Depression-era kitchen and left as garbage, and I mean that in the most literal way possible. When a chicken got butchered, the bones went straight into a pot of cold water over a low fire and stayed there for hours, producing a rich, collagen-heavy broth that formed the base of soups, gravies, and sauces for the next 3 days. Pot liquor, that dark, mineral-heavy liquid left behind after a pot of greens cooked down, got poured directly over cornbread and served as a complete meal on its own. Bacon drippings went into a ceramic jar that lived permanently beside the stove and got used in place of butter, oil, and shortening for everything from frying the morning eggs to seasoning cast iron that had been in the family since before anyone could remember. The fat from a Sunday pork roast became Monday's biscuits. The vegetable water from boiled potatoes went into the bread dough. Nothing that carried any nutritional value, any fat content, any flavor whatsoever left that kitchen without being deliberately redirected into the next meal. Every calorie got used at least twice, and most got used 3 times before anything approached the waste bin. Modern families pour all 3 of these down the drain every single week and call it cleaning up after dinner. Number 24. The one-pot meal philosophy. Depression-era families did not cook 3 separate dishes for dinner. They cooked one. A single heavy pot on the stove held everything. A piece of salt pork, whatever vegetables came out of the garden or the cellar, dried beans soaked overnight, and enough water to stretch it through 2 meals if needed. This was not a recipe, it was a system. The one-pot approach eliminated waste because everything went in together. It saved fuel because you heated 1 burner, not 4. And it produced food that actually tasted like something because everything cooked low and slow until the flavors collapsed into each other. Your slow cooker is a $150 version of a cast iron pot that cost 60 cents in 1931. The method has not changed. The marketing just got fancier. Number 23. Baking bread from scratch every single day. Store-bought bread was a luxury that Depression families genuinely could not afford consistently. So they baked their own. Flour, water, salt, and a little lard or saved fat. That was the entire ingredient list for the bread that fed millions of American families through the worst economic collapse in the nation's history. Women baked every morning the same way they made the bed, automatically, without thinking, because it was simply what the day required. A 25-pound sack of flour cost roughly 40 cents in 1932 and produced enough bread to feed a family for 2 to 3 weeks. The math was not complicated. The discipline was. Today, a decent loaf of sourdough at a bakery runs $8 to $12. The flour to make 4 loaves at home costs about the same. Number 22. Growing food in every available inch of soil. If it could hold dirt, something edible was growing in it. Window boxes, tin cans punched with drainage holes, narrow strips of earth along fence lines, the south-facing slope behind the outhouse. Depression families treated every square foot of soil as a direct deposit into the household account. Pole beans and sweet potatoes were the workhorses, high yield, low maintenance, and dense in calories. Collard greens and turnips went in late because they could survive frost. and extend the growing season by 6 weeks on either end. Families who maintained a serious kitchen garden in the 1930s reduced their food costs by 40 to 60% compared to families who relied entirely on stores. The dirt was free. The seeds cost almost nothing. The labor came from children who would otherwise have been sitting around getting into trouble. 2 birds, 1 garden. Number 21. Canning, preserving, and putting up food for winter. August and September were not the end of summer in a Depression-era household. They were the most financially critical months of the entire year, and every woman who understood that worked accordingly. Every tomato that ripened, every ear of corn pulled from the stalk, every green bean snapped, every peach that came off the tree, and every quart of apple butter stirred over a hot stove went straight into glass jars and got processed in a water bath canner until the lid sealed with that small, deeply satisfying pop that meant another meal was secured. A family with a productive garden and a full pantry shelf of properly sealed canned goods walked into winter with the equivalent of 3 to 4 months of grocery money already spent, already stored, and completely untouchable by whatever the economy decided to do between November and April. Nothing rotted on the counter. Nothing got donated or thrown out because there was too much of it. Women who put up 200, 300, sometimes 400 jars in a single season were not hobbyists pursuing a charming domestic pastime. They were running one of the most efficient food procurement and storage operations in the entire country, out of a kitchen the size of a modern bathroom, with equipment that cost less than $2, mason jars, and a water bath canner. That was the whole system. It still works exactly the same way today, and almost nobody under 40 knows how to do it. Number 20. Feed sacks as fabric. Between the 1920s and the 1950s, flour, sugar, cornmeal, and animal feed all came in cotton sacks. And mills figured out early that if they printed those sacks in patterns and colors attractive enough, women would buy their products specifically to get the fabric. Depression families turned feed sacks into dresses, shirts, curtains, underwear, quilts, and dish towels. A family that went through enough flour and feeds in a season had enough fabric to clothe the children without spending a cent at the dry goods store. Some of the most beautiful quilts in American folk art history were sewn from feed sacks by women who had nothing extra and wasted nothing available. If you think this sounds quaint, price out fabric at a craft store this weekend. Cotton prints run $8 to $12 a yard. Those women were sitting on a fortune, and they knew exactly what to do with it. Number 19. Resoling shoes with cardboard and leather scraps. Shoes were not replaced when they wore out. They were repaired. And when they could not be properly repaired, they were improvised. Cardboard cut to the shape of the inner sole and layered 3 or 4 sheets thick could extend a worn-out shoe by weeks. Leather scraps from old belts or harnesses got shaped into makeshift outer soles and tacked down with salvaged nails. Children's shoes got passed down until they fell apart completely, and then got passed down one more time. A family in 1934 spending money on new shoes when the old ones could still be walked in was considered reckless. Not frugal, reckless. The cobbling trade existed for this exact reason: to make a pair of shoes last a decade instead of a season. Today, Americans throw away over 300 million pairs of shoes annually. Your great-grandmother would not have known what to say. Number 18. Saving every scrap of material without exception. String got wound into balls and saved in a drawer. Brown paper bags were folded and stacked flat for reuse. Rubber bands, buttons cut from worn-out shirts, wire from old fences, scraps of tin, broken handles from tools. All of it went into labeled containers, or hung on pegs, in the shed. Nothing left the property without first being evaluated for secondary use. This was not hoarding. This was inventory management. A Depression household understood that materials represented stored value and stored labor. Buying a new piece of string when there was a ball of saved string in the drawer was waste of the worst kind, the kind that insulted the effort it took to earn the penny that bought it in the first place. The modern equivalent of this habit would save the average American household roughly $800 to $1,200 a year. Most of us just do not notice what we throw away. Number 17. Rendering fat for soap, candles, and cooking. When an animal was slaughtered, and in Depression-era rural America, almost every family kept at least a pig or some chickens. Every part of that animal had a specific destination. The fat went into a cast iron pot over low heat and got rendered down slowly until the impurities separated and the pure white lard floated to the top. That lard went 3 places: into the cooking pot, into homemade soap mixed with lye made from wood, ash, and water, and into homemade candles poured into tin molds when kerosene for the lamp ran short. One hog could produce 40 to 60 pounds of usable lard, which represented months of cooking fat, cleaning supplies, and lighting. Families who rendered their own fat bought almost nothing from the store in those categories. Everything came from the animal that also became dinner. Efficiency does not get more elegant than that. Number 16. Mending, patching, and making clothing last a full decade. A shirt did not go into the rag pile because it developed a hole. It went onto the mending pile and came back out 2 days later with a careful patch sewn in fabric that matched as closely as possible. When a garment could no longer be patched, it got cut down into a smaller garment for a younger child. When it could no longer be worn at all, it became a rag for cleaning, a quilt square, or stuffing for a pillow. The concept of throwing away clothing because it was out of style did not exist. Style was a luxury. Warmth and coverage were necessities. Women who could not sew well learned to sew well because there was no alternative. The average American today throws away roughly 80 pounds of clothing per year. Depression families wore 80 pounds of clothing until it genuinely could not be worn anymore, and then found 3 more uses for it after that. Number 15. Neighbor swapping. Trading skills, food, and labor. Cash was scarce, but skills were everywhere. The farmer who could not afford a dentist traded a cord of firewood for the extraction. The seamstress who needed her roof patched traded 3 new shirts for a Saturday of labor from the man next door. Nobody called it a barter economy. They called it being neighbors. These informal exchange networks covered enormous ground. Childcare, medical care, construction labor, food production, transportation. Entire categories of need got met without a single dollar changing hands. Because everybody had something somebody else needed. And everybody understood that the transaction had to be fair or the network would collapse. The families embedded deepest in these networks survived the hardest years, better than families who tried to go it alone with cash. Community was not a luxury. It was infrastructure. Number 14. Church and community food sharing networks. Every church in Depression-era America ran some version of a food cooperative, whether they called it that or not. Families brought what they had in surplus and took what they were short on. A woman with extra eggs brought 2 dozen on Sunday and left with a jar of preserved peaches and a sack of dried beans contributed by someone else. Nobody tracked it precisely. The social pressure of a tight community handled the accounting. Families that gave generously received generously. Families that only took were quietly noticed. The system operated on trust and reputation, and it fed people that no government program reached in time. Modern food banks are a bureaucratic echo of something that used to happen organically every single Sunday morning in every small town in America. Number 13. Taking in boarders to cover the mortgage. If you had a spare room, you filled it with a paying stranger before you missed a mortgage payment. Census records from 1930 show that in hard-hit urban neighborhoods, nearly 1 in 3 households had at least one non-family member paying rent. A boarder meant $8 to $12 a week in 1931 money, enough in many cases to cover the entire monthly mortgage note. The arrangement required trust and tolerance, and the willingness to share your kitchen and your bathroom with someone whose last name you barely knew. Families did it without hesitation because the alternative was losing the house. Today we call it house hacking and act like some 25-year-old finance influencer invented it. Your great-grandmother did it to keep the lights on and did not need a podcast to explain the math. Number 12. Gleaning fields after the harvest. Gleaning is one of the oldest poverty survival strategies in recorded human history, and Depression-era families practiced it without any self-consciousness at all. After a farmer harvested his corn, his wheat, or his potato crop, families walked the fields behind the equipment and picked up everything that had been missed or left behind. A good gleaning day could fill a bushel basket with potatoes, ears of corn, or loose grain, all of it free, all of it legal, and all of it nutritious. Orchards were gleaned for fallen fruit, and grain fields were walked for missed heads of wheat. Some farmers actively invited gleaners because it cleaned the field for them. The labor was free, the food was free, and nobody went home empty-handed if they were willing to bend down and pick it up. Number 11. Cooperative buying clubs and bulk purchasing groups. Individual families could not always afford to buy in bulk on a single household income that had already been stretched past its natural limits. So they did the logical thing and organized themselves into something more powerful than any one family could manage alone. 3 or 4 families on the same block would pool their money together, appoint the most trusted and detail-oriented person among them to make the run, and send that person to the wholesale market or the grain mill with a shared list and a collective budget. They came back with a 50-pound sack of flour, a case of canned goods, a bulk quantity of dried beans or cornmeal, and divided everything 4 ways on somebody's kitchen table before supper. Each family paid roughly a quarter of what the grocer charged for the same items sold individually, and each family walked away with exactly what they needed and nothing wasted. These buying clubs required 3 things in equal measure: coordination, genuine trust, and a designated person who absolutely would not skim off the top. When all 3 conditions held, participating families cut their grocery costs by 20 to 30% without anyone eating less, going without, or feeling the pinch of the arrangement at all. When the clubs fell apart, and some of them did, it was almost always because somebody skimmed off the top, human nature being what it permanently and predictably is, but the math was always completely sound. Number 10. Bartering labor and goods instead of paying cash. A Depression family that was short on cash was almost never short on something tradable. A morning of fence repair traded for a sack of cornmeal. 2 jars of canned tomatoes traded for a gallon of milk. 3 hours of childcare traded for a chicken. The barter economy that ran underneath the cash economy in 1930s America was enormous and almost entirely invisible to any official accounting. It did not show up in GDP figures. It did not get taxed. It did not require a bank account or a credit score or any institution's permission at all. You had something. Your neighbor needed it. You needed something they had. The transaction happened at the kitchen door on a Tuesday afternoon, and both families walked away better off. The system is still completely legal. Most people have simply forgotten they are allowed to use it. Number 9. Foraging wild greens, berries, mushrooms, and nuts. The woods, the roadsides, and the creek banks were a grocery store that charged nothing and stocked itself every single season. Depression families foraged with the same systematic knowledge their grandparents had carried from Europe, or learned from native neighbors which plants were edible, which were medicinal, which were poisonous, and exactly when, during the season, each one was worth picking. Dandelion greens in April, wild strawberries in June, blackberries in July, black walnuts in September, watercress from cold-running streams almost year-round. A family that knew its local landscape could supplement its diet substantially through every season without spending a cent. This knowledge passed through generations, through direct teaching and observation. When the teaching stopped, somewhere around the 1960s, when supermarkets made it seem unnecessary, the knowledge largely vanished inside a single generation. Number 8. Keeping chickens and rabbits for eggs and meat. A laying hen cost between 25 and 50 cents in 1932 and produced roughly 250 eggs a year. A small backyard flock of 8 to 10 hens meant a family almost never bought eggs and had surplus to trade or sell. Rabbits were even more efficient, fast breeding and low cost to feed, producing a lean, mild meat that could be fried, stewed, roasted, or canned. A breeding pair could theoretically produce 40 to 50 offspring a year on a diet of kitchen scraps and foraged greens. Depression families kept whatever animals their space allowed because every animal was a hedge against the cash economy failing them, which it kept doing, repeatedly, for years. The animal cost almost nothing to maintain. The food security it provided was immeasurable. Number 7. Seed saving and free propagation. A depression family that bought seeds every spring was already losing. The smart ones saved seeds from their best-producing plants every fall, dried them carefully, labeled them in paper envelopes, and stored them in a cool, dry place through winter. The following spring, those seeds cost nothing. The spring after that, the seeds from those plants cost nothing. The cycle continued indefinitely, building over years into a personal seed library perfectly adapted to that specific soil, that specific climate, and that specific family's eating preferences. Tomato varieties got named after grandmothers. Bean varieties got passed between neighbors, like heirlooms, which is exactly what they were. The commercial seed industry that emerged after World War II was built specifically around disrupting this cycle. Annual seeds that could not be saved meant a customer who came back every single year. Your great-grandmother's seed tin was the thing they needed to make obsolete. Number 6. Selling and trading homemade goods door to door. The front door was a storefront, and the neighborhood was a market. Women sold surplus eggs, homemade soap, canned preserves, fresh-baked bread, hand-sewn items, and medicinal herb preparations to neighbors who needed what they had made. Men sold firewood, sharpened tools, repaired shoes and furniture, and traded labor by the hour. None of this required a business license, a storefront, or a merchant account. It required a product worth buying, a fair price, and the willingness to walk up to a door and knock. A woman in rural Georgia in 1934 who sold homemade jams and preserves door to door earned enough in a summer to buy her children's school clothes and keep the electric bill paid. She did not have a brand. She had a good recipe and reliable neighbors. Number 5. Paying cash and refusing credit or installment plans entirely. Depression families who survived with their finances intact shared one characteristic more consistently than any other. They did not owe anyone. They did not buy on installment. They did not carry store credit. They did not borrow against next month's wages. If they could not pay for it in cash on the day of purchase, they did not purchase it. This sounds simple until you remember that installment buying was already widespread in 1929 and one of the significant contributing factors to the financial panic that followed the crash. Families who had borrowed to buy furniture, appliances, and automobiles found themselves unable to make payments when income disappeared. Families who owned everything they had free and clear had nothing to lose to repossession. The discipline of cash only was not just a spending habit. It was a fortress wall, and every bank that extended easy credit was quietly trying to knock it down. Number 4. buying distressed property and land for almost nothing. When families could not pay their mortgages, banks foreclosed. When families could not pay their taxes, counties seized the land. Between 1930 and 1936, millions of acres of American property changed hands at prices that seem almost unbelievable today. Farmland in the Midwest sold at tax auction for the amount of the unpaid taxes, sometimes as little as $2 to $3 an acre for ground that had sold for $30 an acre a decade earlier. The families who had managed to hold on to any cash, or who had a little saved in a mattress rather than in a failed bank, walked into those auctions and bought land at generational prices. They held it, they farmed it, they passed it to their children. The stock market crashed. The land did not go anywhere. It just changed owners. And the new owners, the cash buyers at the bottom, built the family wealth that funded the next 2 generations. Number 3, the envelope and jar system of radical cash management. Long before any financial guru packaged it and sold it as a system, Depression families were dividing every dollar that came into the house into physical containers the moment it arrived. An envelope for rent, a jar for food, a tin for fuel, a small locked box for savings that nobody touched under any circumstances, short of genuine emergency. The physical reality of watching money disappear from envelopes created a discipline that abstract bank accounts simply cannot replicate. When the grocery envelope was empty on Wednesday, you got creative with what was already in the pantry. You did not move money from the rent envelope. That envelope was sacred. The system worked not because it was sophisticated, but because it was honest. It showed you exactly where you stood at any moment with no arithmetic required. The money was either there or it was not. Modern budgeting apps try to recreate this feeling. They mostly fail because touching a screen does not feel like anything. Number 2, teaching children to earn, save, and trade from age 6. Depression-era children were not given allowances for existing. They earned money, and they earned it young. A 6-year-old could collect bottles for deposit refunds, pull weeds for neighbors, gather eggs, or sell surplus vegetables from a small patch of garden designated as theirs to manage. The money they earned was real. The decisions about spending it were real. And the consequences of spending it foolishly, watching it disappear and having nothing left, were real, immediate, and unforgettable. Children who grew up this way became adults who managed money instinctively because the instinct had been trained into them before they were old enough to believe there was any other way to live. The most powerful financial education system ever deployed in American history required no classroom, no textbook, and no tuition. It just required a parent willing to say, "Here is your patch of ground, here are some seeds. Go figure it out." Number 1, owning something outright. Always. No matter how small. This was the organizing principle underneath every other item on this list. It did not matter if what you owned was a quarter-acre lot, a paid-off sewing machine, a flock of 10 chickens, or a single good milk cow. The point was that you owned it, free and clear. No payments, no lien, no institution with the legal authority to show up and take it from you when times got hard. Depression families who owned something, anything, had a foundation to stand on. Families who had borrowed to buy everything had nothing under their feet when the loans got called. The relentless drive toward outright ownership shaped every financial decision. Buy less and own it fully, rather than buy more and owe it endlessly. A small house with no mortgage was worth more than a large house with a payment you could not make. The families who understood this built the foundation that their children and grandchildren are still standing on today. 25 methods, one underlying principle running through all of them. Spend less than you have. Make everything you own work harder. Never pay someone for something you can do yourself or trade for. Own whatever you can, outright, as fast as you can. These were not tricks. They were a value system. And that value system built the most financially resilient generation of ordinary Americans this country has ever produced. Not during prosperity, but during the worst financial collapse in modern history. My name is Lester. This is Forgotten Wealth Tricks. If something on this list hit you differently than you expected, if you watched your own weekly garbage run through your head while we talked about feed sacks and rendered fat and seed envelopes, you are exactly who this channel is made for. Hit subscribe because we do this every week. And drop a comment telling me which one of these 25 you are actually going to try. I want to know if the seed savers outnumber the envelope budgeters, because your great-grandmother already knew the answer. Now so do you.